Joining us now is Sky News contributor Michael Kroger. Michael, thank you for joining us on Power Hour. President Trump has issued another fierce warning to Hamas to release all of the remaining hostages, saying, or else there would be hell to pay. He posted this on Truth Social. He says, "I'm sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job. Not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say. Release the hostages now, or there will be hell to pay later." He went on to say that Hamas must release all of the hostages now, not later, immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you. This is your last warning for the leadership. Now is the time to leave Gaza while you still have the chance. We've heard this type of language from Donald Trump before, and we've seen to have results come from that. This seems to really feel like his final threat to Hamas. What do you make of it?
Well, it does, but he sort of made this threat before, the 12 o'clock next Saturday threat he made a few weeks ago. And the problem is, what is he actually going to do? What are the Israelis going to do? It's not as if Israel hadn't been trying to wipe out Hamas for over a year. And there's still hundreds, probably thousands of their fighters still there as we see them when they're releasing hostages, those shocking staged events. So I'm not sure what Trump thinks he's going to do. That's the issue with this. He doesn't tell us. Are they going to send American boots on the ground? No. Are the Israelis going to start fighting again? Possibly, but don't forget they've been doing that. And secondly, he says you should leave Gaza. Well, where are they going to go? No one wants them. No one wants these Hamas fighters. Their Palestinian brothers in Jordan and Egypt and other countries don't want them. So I regret to say it may be a hollow threat, given all I've just said and given the history of what's happened in Gaza since October 7, Gab.
I seem to doubt that it would be a hollow threat when this is the third time he's made it. It's going to look pretty bad if Hamas doesn't follow through with this.
It does, but as I said, I'm not sure what's he going to do. He's not going to send American troops there. Is he going to continue? Are the Israelis going to continue bombing? Possibly. Are they going to send troops back in to take the rest of Hamas out? They could, but as I said, they've been trying that for a long time. So it's very unclear what he means by this threat and what he can actually do. He could put more pressure on Qatar, the friends of Hamas. He could put pressure on Iran. He might mean that he's given the Israelis the bombs necessary to take out Iran's nuclear facilities. That's something he could do. So if he's doing anything, it sounds to me more like he's doing something external to the geography of Gaza itself, because the Israelis have tried that. So, yeah, he could. The most obvious thing would be to take out the Iranian nuclear facilities and say to Hamas, I warned you, so I'm going to attack your sponsors. And if you don't release the hostages, then I'll do something else, which might mean more bombings against the Houthis. So an external act is probably, to me, more likely than something internal, because that's been tried.
OK, well, I do hope that it does put pressure on Hamas to return the hostages. And of course, this threat, it comes just hours after the White House revealed that it had opened unprecedented talks with Hamas. The White House confirmed that President Trump's envoy for hostage affairs had met directly just in recent weeks with Hamas officials in Qatar. Now, these negotiations were the first time that negotiations have been held between Hamas and the US directly in quite some time, since 1997. What do you make of this?
Well, this is typical Trump. He doesn't feel he needs to go through a third party. He's changing the international rules of engagement. He doesn't feel he needs to go through the Israelis to talk to Hamas. So he holds talks directly with them. His negotiator, who he sent, has been very successful already in getting hostages released. What happened in those discussions, we don't know. But does it surprise us that he talks directly to Hamas? Not really. If you look at the White House spokesman, she said they'd informed the Israelis. The Israelis probably didn't like it, but he probably went there and gave Hamas a pretty strong message there in Doha. So this is part of Trump's rules of engagement. I'm a big boy. I can make my own decisions. I'll talk to them directly. don't go through a middleman. And that's exactly what he's done. So, I think that's only productive. He wants Hamas to hear it directly from him, whatever that message was, which, as I said, we don't quite know.
Let's talk about Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky says that his meeting with Donald Trump and JD Vance in front of the whole media, well, that meeting was regrettable, and he says that he is ready to sign this minerals deal. Now, we know that Donald Trump has paused US military aid to Ukraine, and the latest development is that the US has paused intelligence sharing with Ukraine. So that possibly includes critical data for identifying Russian strike targets. Now, that's likely to have some quite serious consequences. How significant is this in terms of putting, real pressure on Ukraine to show more of a willingness to engage in talks with Putin and the US? What does it mean for the war?
Well, it is serious to halt the flow of weapons and to halt briefings on intelligence is incredibly serious. But to understand Trump, you've got to understand two things, which people have got to see this with great clarity. When you understand these two things, you understand what he's doing. First of all, his policy is America first, and he's explained that 1,000 times. The second thing you've got to remember is the American economy is completely unsustainable. The budget deficit, the budget position is unsustainable. When you understand those two things, most of what Trump does is explicable. So his view basically is, as we know, why should American troops and American taxpayer funds go to the Ukraine? That's Europe's job. Well, I think most people outside Europe agree with that. And he's been very successful in getting the Europeans to start thinking about increasing their defence expenditure. Look at the UK, for example. So it is very serious for the Ukraine. What we don't know is what's been said in those discussions with the Russians, privately with the Russians. We don't know what Russia are prepared to give up to do in order to resolve this endless war. So Trump's basically saying to the Europeans, you pay, no American troops on the ground, Ukraine has to reach some kind of compromise because he knows the Europeans are not really in a position to fund this war. At the end of the day, Trump knows without America, the Europeans can't fund the war. And in 3 years, it's a tit for tat. The Russians have taken more ground than they've lost. They've lost a small amount, but not much. The war's been going for over 3 years. It's unsustainable. The Europeans don't have the will or the capacity to fight it. So Trump says to himself, well, look, they can't win the war for the Ukraine. So it has to stop. I need Ukraine to compromise, and I need the Russians to compromise. And that's what he's doing. The Europeans, let's be frank, they can bleat all they want about JD Vance and Trump. The fact of the matter is the Europeans have been so weak over the last decade, 20 years maybe, since the war, if you want to take it back that far. And Trump's basically saying, we are not the world's policemen any longer to fund every single country, every single war. You take up the mantle. But even if you do take up the mantle, you cannot help Ukraine win the war, so there has to be peace. And that's where Trump's coming from.